It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Bashir is eavesdropping at the O'Brien household. The arrival of Quark's larger ears makes things easier, and we learn there's an argument inside. Not between O'Brien and Keiko, as we're made to expect, but between O'Brien and Kira, her having moved in while pregnant. Keiko arrives to calm it down, so Bashir and Quark lose their entertainment. Speaking of entertainment, Worf is debating Klingon opera singers with Dax. That goes out of the airlock when he clocks a Klingon woman boarding the station, and one we've seen before. It's Worf's first time, though, and he's rather smitten with her, much to Dax's disappointment. He's a bit thrown by her being friendly with Quark, and even more so to learn that's because they used to be married, as this is none other than Grilka from back in Season 2. Quark helped her out of a bind back then, which is pretty generous considering the kidnapping and all, which is why she's back with her current woes. The unpleasantness with the Federation has done a number on her house, not least of which financially. Quark is gracious enough to suggest him looking over the books would be his pleasure rather than making her ask, an offer that goes down well. With Grilka anyway, her guard doesn't seem as impressed and tells Quark that if he can't help Grilka, he'll be eating a batleth. Worf's pissed off with the idea of Quark and Grilka being friendly too, Dax having brought him up to speed. She thinks he's got a case of the MACH, which is basically Klingon infatuation, only with more punching. She's on the money too, based on his behaviour later in Quark's. He quietly apologises to Morn before pulling him off his seat, then starts shouting at the guy who threatened Quark. Grilka's assistant pulls Worf aside and explains, not unkindly, that all of this posturing is pointless. Worf's dishonoured, so Grilka can never do the dirty with him, and besides, he doesn't know anything about Klingon women in the first place. Formally being told to piss off is the cherry on top, and Worf withdraws. Worf's being comforted by Dax for his embarrassment. It's hard to imagine things getting worse, so naturally they do. Quark arrives looking for Dax, our previously heightened security for the Defiant apparently having gone down the shitter now Eddington's buggered off. Quark's going to be having dinner with Grilka later, though whether it's really as intimate a thing as he wants it to be is another matter. Still, he's willing to put in the effort, which is why he's here for advice. Dax gives him the basics, which largely amounts to don't stare at her tits, but it's Worf who has the real goods. He knows traditions specific to her location on Kronos and shares them, perhaps prompted by being told earlier that he doesn't know anything about Klingon women. Quark doesn't care as long as he's getting insider tips. Even being told that rejection might end in broken bones doesn't dissuade him, but then maybe that plugs straight into his appreciation of risk and reward. Kira and O'Brien are getting along again. Part of that is him knowing exactly what massages will help make pregnancy easier. He says it's a family skill, which I guess is quite literal in this case. Keiko urges him to continue when she drops off some clothes, then leaves, and O'Brien makes his way up Kira's back. They're getting along a bit too well, in fact, something both of them realise at exactly the same moment as they're talking about spending time together, which is also when Keiko comes back in and tells them to carry on in spite of her. As they're experiencing unwanted attraction, Quark is fully appreciating his. Everything went amazingly during his dinner with Grilka, and he returns to thank Worf for the advice. Worf's gratified by knowing that he was right, which might have been part of why Quark said it, as he wants more advice. Dax is involved too, as Worf's new idea is a holosuite rendition of a Klingon romance story, which is to say hitting things with a partner. Quark's not into it until Dax tells him the story traditionally ends with Kales going full dirty little bastard with his companion, a fact that perks him right up, so to speak. Not everybody is delighted with how well his wooing of Grilka is going, though. Her guard is getting pissed off with the whole thing. So much so, in fact, that when they return from the holosuites after a successful date, he does a bit of vandalism and challenges Quark to a death match. Back in the O'Brien household, things are getting back to normal, at least until Kira arrives. Keiko suggests O'Brien should give an exhausted Kira some massage attention, an idea that has both of them finding reasons not to. The whole thing with O'Brien has been difficult enough to make Kira decide she's going to Bajor for a few days. O'Brien thinks that's a great idea, until Keiko suggests he join her. She can't go alone after all, as she may go into labour, and Keiko is busy here with plant shit. She assumes they're fighting again when they both try and decline, so when they deny this, Keiko insists O'Brien go with her and won't take no for an answer. Quark's trying to figure out a way of not getting murderized. The plan he used last time of shaming his opponent isn't going to work because nobody will intervene, which means he's shit out of options. Until Dax thinks of cheating, anyway. To a holosuite we go where Quark and Dax are fighting, except no they're not, because it's actually Worf and Dax, the former controlling Quark's body through science bollocks. Quite how Captain Honourable squared this with himself is unknown, but it's the only chance Quark has to live through tomorrow, so let's ignore that for now. Even though he's doing it, Worf still complains about the situation once Quark has gone. Dax wants to know quite what Worf sees in Grilka, and his response of her basically being a big dommy mommy doesn't wash. In fact, she suggests his interests might be better off served elsewhere. No time for that, though, as we've got a fight to cheat. Quark's opponent is a little surprised to find he's not completely incompetent, perhaps having assumed this would only take a few seconds. He almost gets his wish. Some fuck-about grandstanding from Worf ends up with him bashing his control rig and leaving Quark in the lurch. A little quick talking on his part invents a Ferengi custom where Quark makes a speech about Grilka, and as he's respecting Klingon customs, it's only fair they let him fulfill his own. Only until Dax repairs the rig, though, then he stops and gets on with the fight. It's over shortly thereafter, Worf having enough sense to actually focus on getting it done this time. Rather than finish his opponent, he puppets Quark into taking the guy's blade and handing it to Grilka. Quark doesn't have a Scooby what's going on, but Grilka recognizes this as an honorable tradition or some shit and releases the guard from her service. As he and Grilka's assistant leave, she grabs hold of Quark. It's dirty little bastard time, and Worf is still plugged in. Dax disconnects him so Quark can have his unearned reward in peace. Worf's still not happy about the whole thing, of course, though Dax has had enough faffing around, and rather than drop obvious hints, instead summons up her own bat'leth and starts fighting Worf. They disarm each other quickly enough, then end up on the floor together, and quite how long they stay down there is left up to the discretion of the viewer. Kira and O'Brien are getting into a mega shuttle to go to Bajor. Neither look delighted at the prospect and its possible outcome, and O'Brien, learning that the place they'll be staying is both picturesque and very private, convinces him to nix the whole thing. He'll make something up about getting the wrong time, he says, and deal with the aftermath from Keiko. That way, at least he'll still have a wife to argue with. Kira decides she'll go and visit Shakar instead, and after they lament that something could have worked under different circumstances, O'Brien buggers off. Probably just as well when a good third of the cast has been going dirty little bastard mode elsewhere. Bashir's dealing with the aftermath, Klingon sexy times, often involving a number of injuries. He buggers off to try and get the image of Quark's O-face out of his head, leaving Worf and Dax to talk things over. Klingon custom says they should marry now, but Worf's got the good sense to not push anything. Instead, he reluctantly agrees to see where things will go, so we'll leave them to decide if this is the opening salvo of a war or a brief skirmish that fizzles out, until the next adventure. Trills do not look for romance in the way humans do. In fact, we find it quite a nuisance. It's a weakness of the young, and although a Trill host may have these feelings occasionally, it is our wish to live on a higher plane, to try to rise above these kinds of temptations. A speech given in the first season by Dax when batting away the attentions of Bashir. Since then, we've had episodes about her leaving everything for a guy she's just met, getting jiggy with a former partner, and jumping on Worf. All of which doesn't include the one about former host Curzon having an affair, or the regular references to him being a ladies' man, or the fact that he fancied Jadzia. A casual observer could be forgiven for thinking the alleged Trill disdain for romance might not be quite as accurate as reported. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I don't generally look for romance plots in episodes of Trek. To my mind, they either address an ongoing societal concern, with enough padding to make it deniable and ending in misery, or are used as an excuse for titillation. As such, I'm perhaps not the person best suited to judge the content of this episode. It simply wasn't made for me. That said, I doubt I'm alone in finding the inherent dishonesty of Cyrano de Bergerac shenanigans distasteful. I can buy Quark playing into it, as that's keeping with the character, but Worf and Dax? Is our bright utopian future really one where deliberate deception for sex is not only accepted, but actively facilitated by our best and brightest? It just seems so utterly at odds with the ethics on display elsewhere. When you step back and look at what actually happened in the episode, is it really that far removed from the sort of shit you'd expect from so-called pickup artists or the like? It's all so seedy. Again, that's a fair fit for Quark, and one that I find easier to believe than the Casablanca knockoff we did 3 seasons ago. I just don't think it works for honourable Worf or worldly-wise Dax. That's enough negativity for one analysis, so let's try and end on a positive. I might not have had much time for Quark and Grilka, or Dax and Worf for that matter, but at least Kira and O'Brien rang true. The story of 2 people who you wouldn't expect to be a match getting put in close proximity and, quite without conscious intent, finding themselves attracted to each other. Sometimes these things just happen from an unexpected direction, and we need to acknowledge them to move beyond it. Ronald D. Moore has said much the same, calling this subplot one of the most real storylines featured in Trek. Perhaps I've got more time for it because it's the antithesis of the Quark plot, people resisting a base instinct because it would be unethical. That's a far more positive message than the one we got from the comedy side of the episode, and the one I think should be our focus. There is one more thing before we go, though. It's been a while since we've had mention of the Babylon 5 crossover club, so we should point out that Thopok here, played by Phil Morris, was also Bill Traynor in the Season 3 episode Severed Dreams. More than that, he's also technically a member of the Trek Wars crossover club, with some of his frankly prodigious voice acting work having gone to a couple of Star Wars video games. He's also a member of Trek royalty because, as well as another couple of Trek appearances after this one, he also appeared in the original series episode Miri, albeit uncredited. I think he's this one here, but don't hold me to it as I couldn't find any hard data beyond boy in army helmet. While we're talking about the Babylon 5 crossover club, we should probably mention Grilka too. We missed Mary Kay Adams last time around as we weren't keeping track then, so we'll catch up now by pointing out that she's a member as well. A relatively important one too, as she played Jakar's personal aide, Natoth. To be more accurate, she's one of the people who played Natoth, as the other was Julie Caitlin Brown. I mention that here because she also appeared on Deep Space Nine before we were trying to point these out, playing Tai Kajada back in Season 1's The Passenger. Funny how these things sometimes loop back around. End of episode.
How do you plan on getting us out then?
Hold up, why is it up to me to figure it out?
It was your idea.
Yeah, and you're a literal computer.
No, I'm a fictional computer from the 24th century, stuck inside a cartoon dog without a face. I'm not sure how many of those skills are going to be useful when navigating Reddit.
Alright, but there's got to be some sort of crossover. It can't have changed that much.
Do you know how the circulatory system of dinosaurs worked?
No?
Then why would I understand HTML?
Fair point. Got anything in your, reference library?
I'll have a root around. Okay, here we go. First off then, do we know what baud of dial-up modem he's using?
I get the feeling we're going to be here a while. Oof.